Hi, Keith.
Hi, Jim should be on shortly. I just was talking to him and he was, I think, getting signed in. I sent you over some documents there if you want to just hit the send button and send them to everybody.
I can do that. I'm going to mute myself because we have some people training in the gym and I can hear the music and I don't want that to come through.
I'm not hearing anything. Our sound is perfect right now, whatever's going on.
Okay, perfect. Good. I'll send that over. But Jim, Keith, I do see Jim's name popped up, so he should be on the call, and it looks like he's connecting to his audio right now.
Okay.
So I'll leave this in your hands to really lead it. So,
Yep.
So you're in control.
You're gonna send those documents so I can tell them they're on the way to them?
Yes. I will go to my email right now and do that.
All right. I had a couple that called me and asked if they could call me later, and I said absolutely. They were busy at noon.
Yes, and I am recording this right now, so
Okay.
I'll post it as well to our website, and I can probably forward this recording to you as well if you want to share it or share
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay.
Jim, are you on yet? I don't see him on my thing, and I don't hear him. Yeah, his picture's there. So do you think he's doesn't have his sound turned on?
Yeah, it's weird. It looks like he's not connected by sound, but he is here.
Yeah,
So
well, that happens to me all the time when I get on, and then I have to go down and fish out the audio. I don't know why it's doing that.
Yeah, I know we needed him to be able to talk.
Cara, I don't think that's your current picture, is it?
For those who
I think it was not last summer, the summer before.
Okay.
But thanks for pointing that out.
Is Cheryl Moore on yet?
Cheryl said she wasn't going to be able to make it, so I'm gonna.
Oh, okay. I'll have to tell him then. Okay, so all right, I'll have to bring up what Jeremy. We're going to be getting that letter sometime.
I did forward on the couple letters that the one email and a letter that he received last evening, and then his comments. I forwarded on to everybody.
I got that, but then I also got Cheryl called me this morning and said she talked to him this morning, and then he's waiting on the official, letter. She said that we would be getting it.
Yeah, so everybody who's on, just so you know, there's more feedback coming back from the governor's office. Right now, Jeremy said that really it all depends on you moving forward, depends on your county that you're in. So if your county doesn't have any restrictions, feel free to move forward. But that, again, those are still, it's not law, they're just recommendations. And in regards to the schools and opening up, I think there's just been a lot of different things thrown at the superintendents right now, different avenues of moving forward, depending on if they're reading something from the Department of Health versus the DPI. So, but he said so for example, one-on-one Milwaukee yesterday, Mary Nellen did go to Pius High School. She shared the Smart Start plan with them. She shared a more specific plan for her and how she would run her leagues. And the letter from Jeremy to the governor and the one from the DPI. And because of all of that, they felt very confident, and they're opening up their doors to her program to be able to run her leagues and her program. So she's
Was Mary going to jump on the call, or am I going to need to call her when this is over?
I
Keith,
think
Keith, can you hear me?
Yes,
You can? Okay. All right, good.
you're on now.
All
Okay,
right, yeah.
that's Jim Foy.
yeah,
All right, before we start, because I got, Mary wants to know all this information I'm going over too, and I thought I would wait till we were doing it here today, but I will call and go over it all with her if I need to. So I got to do it with a couple others.
yeah. And Keith, we'll have this, I'm recording this right now, so we'll send that to them as well.
Yeah.
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 So
I've always learned on these things that no matter what you do, there's always questions afterwards.
Sure.
All right. Well, I think we could get started, right?
Yes. Go ahead, Keith, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you. All right. This is Keith Knoll, your governor for the Wisconsin AAU, and I'm also the Zone C representative for AAU for about 16 states throughout the Midwest, all the way to Montana, down to Arkansas, Oklahoma, over to Indiana, all the states in between. I've been monitoring every one of the states because I got to keep AAU abreast of what's going on. But I can tell you right now, and I talked to our president, CEO this morning, in our position, this stuff's changing, as you know, daily. It's absolutely amazing how much it's changing. So at the end of the day, as far as the AAU goes, if you're an AAU licensed club and your members are AAU, and you go out and you go play, as long as you're following the guidelines too that the AAU's putting out. And I sent you over the basketball committee. No one else has seen this in the country other than the executive committee for basketball, but I forwarded it over today to all of you. And that is the did everybody get the documents? Did Lisa, you already sent those to everybody?
Which documents are you?
All the ones this morning I sent over and asked you to, there's like 6 of them in
Okay.
attachments, and I asked to send those over to everybody.
Okay, I'm gonna send those right now. I'm just looking for that email.
Okay, I'm
Yep.
gonna just start talking about it then. So anyway, the AAU basketball program is come out with an event modification, for the event. And there's a pre-event registration. There's a list of this stuff, and during the event of what we suggest, is done. And that's going to be the guidelines coming from the National AAU for our clubs to implement for their events or practices or whatever they're doing. The other thing that had been asked, if you have a school, when this letter comes out, and they're going to leave it up to the school districts on who wants to rent their facilities to outside groups. So if you're lucky enough to get one of those, all you got to do is make sure that you're following your guidelines for your not only the state, but take a look at your county so you don't get in any trouble with them. But if you're given permission to go ahead and your AAU coverage on the liability, there is no sports accident insurance, as you know, as I've been over before. This is a virus, it's an illness. But if a club were to get sued, then our liability insurance would kick in. But there's so many scenarios that could happen. Each case would be a separate deal, but it's nice to know that you have coverage behind you, and that would defend you at the very least. I think when you get that registration, those lists I sent out, I sent you out a thing showing, for those that are not AAU members, the application form for a youth athlete, for adult, for a club application. There's 3 levels in AAU, level 1, 2, and 3. Level 2 and 3 provide the coverages that you're going to want, and that's in the insurance summary. To a point, I'll let Jim talk about the level 1, and what it does. But I think the biggest thing here is that, you know, we have what's called an A and an AB membership. A is just when you're playing in AU events only. 90% of the basketball teams in this country play in all kinds of events, not just AAU. So I suggest to them, and most of you, some of you I know that are on the phone, are AAU AB members. And that's $2 more, and everybody on the team has to do it, including the coaches. But then it gives you that insurance when you go play in another organized event that's not, you know, that's not being run by you, the club. But if you're going to play at the Badger State games or, you know, the JYV tournament that you have nothing to do with, your kids are going to be covered, which is, you know, it's good safety. I'm going to let Jim Foy, well, you know what? How are we going to do the hands, Lisa? You going to be able to do that to see if anybody's got specific questions, or are we going to leave everybody open, or how you want to do this?
So I think, I'm sure that Jim has some topics he wants to cover, but it's really up to you guys. If you want people to be able to unmute themselves and ask a question as you're talking, they can feel free to do that.
I would say we could do that, and then just identify yourself every time you're doing a question so we can keep track of that. And then if we have to get back to you on something, we know who we're talking to. But yes, if before we move on, you know, I'll just say, are there any questions? And then if we get too many of them, we'll have to figure it out and take them one at a time. But before I bring Jim on, who is the insurance broker for the AAU, we consider him the best in the country. He's been doing this for a long, long time, and no one's been able to mirror on the sports side, you know, what the AAU does for insurance for its clubs and its programs. But before we go on to Jim, are there any questions? Or maybe we should just go on to Jim because he may answer some of the questions they already have. And then we'll go to it after Jim speaks. So Jim, you want to go ahead and if you would give an overview of the AAU insurance program and also what's going on out there nationally and with the insurance companies and the limited markets. I think they all need to hear that, and they need to also know that if the AAU doesn't provide a certain insurance and they need that for their club or business, that you guys can figure that out, and there's a good chance that they could get credit for their travel teams already being with the AAU. But if you would, why don't you take it over, and then I'll chime in if I think I have to.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Can anybody hear me, Keith?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. The first thing I think, just to mention the insurance market is such. To give you an example, I sent a proposal quote out to 20 different insurance companies to obtain a sports insurance policy. Out of those 20 applications I completed, 18 declined. One gave me a quote with a sports rule exclusion, which is completely just like me going to McDonald's trying to sell them a business owner's policy with a hamburger exclusion. It doesn't work that well. So I basically got one quote. That was it. And that's how the market is out there. So that the biggest thing we can do is try to avoid serious claims to put us in the crosshairs of the underwriter saying, you know, why do we want to write this anymore? There are no markets. They've just all dried up. There were probably 10 markets at one time to 15. It's down to a couple of markets, and then you got the surplus lines and Lloyd's of London and stuff like this. So it's important that we make sure that we register everybody, make sure they get the waivers done and stuff like this. And as Keith mentioned, on the division, on the level 2 and 3, that's when you can host an event. Level 1 does not host an event. However, all levels have the same insurance, except you can't host if you're level 1, you can't actually run an AAU event. Now, the biggest thing we're trying to get, the biggest question we get is if I'm opening my facility or I'm running a club, what have you, and somebody says that I caught the COVID or coronavirus from this event, will I have coverage? the event itself is covered for liability insurance from the point of view if an action is brought against you. That's the basic thing. As long as you're following the common sense, the local, state, regional, federal guidelines, CDC. But if you're inviting people that have got the coronavirus in to play a game, then I would think you've really stepped over the line. So using common sense and following the guidelines. And as Keith mentioned earlier, one of the keys on this is it changes every day. I mean, I'm looking at the rules and regulations and stuff, and it was not last night, the night before, the CDC said, well, it doesn't look like we have to wipe off counters and desks anymore because it doesn't look like the coronavirus actually has a problem with that. So that there's another exception that you run across. But I am very much behind the administration, the White House, simply saying, we're not going to close down again. We're going to open up. They're very aggressive, and that's what you have to do. This virus is serious, but the economy is going to be worse than the virus if we don't watch out. So we have to open this thing up, but use common sense. But that's all. I think it's like in any flu season or what have you, you just have to be careful. And I've never seen people, at least in my area in New England here now, I mean, everybody's wearing masks, they're washing their hands and stuff like this. So that I think as long as we keep a reasonable approach, common sense, we'll be fine. If one thing I do want to mention, the AAU has small clubs, medium clubs, and big clubs. And big clubs have a need for more insurance than what any association program would probably put forth. And if you have multiple organizations that you do business with, that even calls for even more having, I think, a separate policy. Now, this is basketball we're talking about, Keith. Is that correct? And if that's the case, basketball is pretty much you're going into a facility, and that it's usually a school or something like this. You don't own or lease your own facility on a permanent basis. So that from that point of view, it works out very well. But if you are a gymnastic or a martial arts or what have you, you have other needs. You need 24/7 coverage. So any of you got additional programs in your club, you should get a hold of your agent or drop me a line and I can give you an answer on how much the AAU will cover you. And we do have, or did have, a program where we could expand. That was called a wraparound policy that may be brought back to help you get additional coverage if you need it. But generally speaking, the AAU will cover any AAU event up to $10 million, which no one else is even close to that as far as this goes. Now, if you're looking for additional coverages, as I said, outside of contacting your local agent, you can contact anybody as far as this goes, or send me an email. Keith, is anything, but this is just basketball, is that right?
These are all basketball people, but some of these people own their own businesses and whether they rent the facility or own it, but they run other, they do other stuff in there. So I think, if you give them a general overview, it's probably a good idea because it all is relative.
Yeah, well, Keith had somebody that he knew that had a facility. And Keith says, you ought to call Jim. He says that, sometimes these insurance policies are what you think they are. And you know who I'm talking about, Keith. I won't mention his name. But
let me tell that story because that's one of my buddies. This guy was in St. Louis, and some of you, if you're hockey fans, probably know, it was our buddy. Anyway, now you just made me lose my train of thought. But
John
Perry Turnbull, and he was one of those enforcers on the hockey team, rough guy, tough guy. And when he retired, the St. Louis community there rented him a facility where he was able to put a hockey rink in it, and they rented it to him for $1 a year. Well, one of his buddies he played with had gone into the insurance business, so he asked him to write him a policy. Well, then I came around several years later in the AAU, and we were going to run the Junior Olympics for inline hockey at his facility. And I said, you ought to take a look at the insurance that the AAU has from what you have. And he says, well, I don't. I said, why don't you contact Jim Foy? And here's his fax number. Fax over your policy. and he'll look at it, and then he'll tell you if you got a good deal or if he can save you money, he'll let you know. And he was spending, $12,000 a year for this total policy for his business. And we get a call from Jim. He said, I got good news and bad news. You want the good news or the bad news? I said, just give us the bad news. He said, well, the policy that his buddy wrote must be more of a carrier for cars and that type and homes, because in this one it had an exclusion for sports liability. So in other words, if he would have been sued because something happened under the liability side, he would have had no coverage because it would have been right in the policy. So there again, I've come across this more than once, where some agents out there, sports is a whole different ballgame, different market. And a lot of times some of these guys don't really understand that market as much as they think they can. And that's why I think the AAU's been with FOIA Insurance for a long, long time. And Jim's considered one of the top, if not the top, sports writer for insurance out there in the country. But Jim, you can go ahead with the rest of that. So.
The one thing I want to emphasize is that I'm very big on having the AB membership. It's actually called extended benefit, and it just makes a lot of sense. That's all. That because you can play anytime, anywhere, and be covered. Most associations don't have that. We brought that in 20 years ago with the AAU, and it's really worked out well. And I have a baseball program, and I got 350 kids, and I can tell you that we're playing AAU, non-AAU. It goes back and forth. And some sports are very much AAU, others spread out too. So for the extra $2 is the best investment there is. In fact, I've told Keith a number of times we ought to do away with the A and just have everybody A, B, or extended benefit. So if any of you don't have the extended benefit, I would suggest you do. It's well worth the $2 investment. And if you're going to have an event, it's a good idea if you're having a lot of events to buy. Isn't it for 5? If you but it's 5 or 7 events, you can buy a card that covers basically all your events for the whole year. So you don't have to keep calling in for this charge. I think it's $50 an event. Is that what it is, Keith? For that, you're
talking about the event insurance.
Yeah, you call it something. I can't think of the name. I know it as far as this goes.
You must be talking about licensing an event.
That's what it is.
Yeah, then and then you can do a sanction for. We get almost all of our people, as you know, in hockey and football. And I was telling our basketball people this last week that I'm gonna probably come up with a blanket sanction is what it's called, Jim. Blanket sanction.
That's
and then I'm going to create a deal where we put all of our clubs that are AAU underneath that, and then we'll create a series with all those organizations and the facilities that they are out of, and then we can get everybody on that list for the insurance, third-party certificates, everything. It's going to do 2 things. One, it's going to protect them on the insurance side, no question about it, and that it's going to help them all be able to do events where, that they get teams coming from all the different areas. And we're going to try to promote the private facilities. That's one of the things that we want to do. We want the private facilities are getting hit hard on this. So we're going to come up with some ways here that we think we can get, if we can get our clubs out there playing each other and going to their facilities, that it could be a win-win for everybody. And we really don't need this year to be trying to even think about traipsing all over the country to play in events. We have enough great teams in Wisconsin that if we get organized, I feel pretty strongly that we can get all the good competition we want. And now my buddies to the west of me, I see last night, and I think I sent that to you, Lisa, to go ahead and send out to everybody. But Minnesota has been pretty much shot out of the water for running any events this summer. They'll be able to do practice for their teams or individual workouts. But Minnesota Governor's Office just ruled yesterday that events are out for all the way probably through till the school year starts. So go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry I talked too long there.
No, that's fine. You're doing well. If you give me a chance to eat a sandwich. So that, but the questions, I think that in my mind, we have a number of insurance offices throughout the country, and that we're an essential business, so we stayed open, but we sent about 100 people home, and we're starting to bring them back in, and we're opening the doors to foot traffic as well. And we have the same concerns about, what happens if somebody contacts coronavirus and such, that we ask the employees to come back to work, and one of them gets the coronavirus and takes it home to the mother-in-law, and she contracts it, and because she's 90 years old, she dies or something like this. So there's all sorts of litigation that can be a little scary out there, but we all are in the same boat. This is all something new. There's no real good answer, and give credit to the Trump administration by simply saying we're going to see if we can ban any lawsuits regarding this, because frankly, this is just a way for lawyers to make money. So that apologize to any lawyers on the staff. I deal with them all day long, and that they're licking their chops on this deal as far as this goes. Just try to do everything you possibly can and use common sense, because frankly, outside of that, I don't know how anybody else is going to get through this type of thing. But we have to be open. We have to keep going. We're opening our office. We're bringing people in, and that everybody has to basically do that. And I don't know if anybody of you heard the Trump say today. He says we are not going to close.
Jim, could you touch base on our coverages, because I don't think all of them have seen our insurance summary. I know they'll read it probably later, but if they have any questions on one of the things I saw in there too that I hadn't really paid attention to before. But with the level 2 and 3 guys, this is probably important for the clubs, and I think most of the ones on the phone all have sponsors. But there's a provision in there too on the third-party certificate. You can name your sponsor on the third-party certificate, protecting them from any lawsuit as well.
Yes, you can. We did that a long time ago, and it not only is the AAU insured, the district's insured, but the clubs are insured, and the sponsors are the clubs, and that's an important type of situation. I sponsor clubs myself, and that a sponsor can be sued. It can be sued, so that therefore you want to protect the people that are helping you out, and they are covered under the program, and that's why it's important to have a $10 million policy. I'm not running a club with $1 million worth of liability. That's I once paid a claim for a sports organization for $5 million, and that some people think that's a lot of money. I can tell you I paid that 25 years ago. So imagine what that would be today, to give you an example. So that it is important to have good liability, and you have to have sufficient liability. It doesn't do any good to have a good liability policy with $1 million limit, and you end up being sued for $5 or $10 million. So
I think, Jim, too, when the facilities, especially in today's time, and even with the letter that's going to come out of the governor's office, and saying leaving it up to the schools and what have you. But I think that for those that are AAU, and I know that a couple have done it, that it's good if you can show them something too up front where you have these type of coverages, because it's probably going to help you get in the facility to be able to rent it.
Yeah, and one thing good about the AAU, getting a certificate of insurance kind of outlines the coverages, and you can get like a practice certificate, you can get immediately right online. So that's a big advantage. We put that in about maybe 15 years ago now, and that's a big savior as far as getting. If 2 or 3 different organizations want to use this, whoever comes up with a certificate first is going to probably win out. You want my personal opinion? That's what normally happens. And if the AAU has the insurance policy by far, not even close. We're competing with some NGBs that have $1 or $2 million limit, and we've got 10 million. And believe it or not, you can have $10 million limit and pay that $10 million out, and a few months later get another $10 million claim and be covered. So it's not just one $10 million. But I can tell you, if you're a club that has 2 $10 million claims in 1 year, I would suggest you try to go someplace else and renew.
Yeah.
But anyways, we have 10 million per club, and it's what they call an aggregate up to even 12. And we have participant legal liability. This is important. I just saw a policy last night, the night before. They showed they had a $3 million policy, 1 million general liability, and a $2 million umbrella or excess policy. And participant liability is where the member sues the club. One of the participants sues the club. That's by far your biggest exposure. And so now you feel a little better having a $3 million policy. And I told the insured last night, I said, you know, you really don't have a $3 million policy because the excess policy excluded participant legal liability, excluded abuse coverage, excluded concussion. So it isn't what you think it is as such. You really have to know and read the policy and have somebody idea what's going on. The exclusions that you find on the excess are very common, and you don't want to have, you want what they call a following form for excess. Whatever's on the basic general liability, you want it following form, and you want it to see that right there. And that's very important. Now, the other thing is a lot of places we have a crisis management coverage, which actually we've had a little use of. This is where a bad news story comes out and hurts your reputation or something like this. We can actually go out and try to correct a lot of that, and that's called crisis management. And the spectators are going to be covered, of course. Event organizers, promoters, sponsors, managers of AAU licensed events, volunteers, very important. I mean, where would we be without volunteers? I think they're extremely important. So that the officials, refs, umps, and so forth like this, these are all important. And we've had some serious claims with his refs and umps and stuff like this that are involved. So that is important. And I think all the refs that do AAU games and what have you and umps should be AAU members. They don't have to be, but I strongly suggest that they do that for a small amount of
Didn't
money.
we have, Jim, what was that case down south? It was just in the last couple of years. I don't know how much we paid out, but didn't we have, between the coach and the refs, somebody killed one of them?
Yeah, the coach was upset by the refereeing, and that after the game, the coach caught the two refs out in the parking lot, and they started to argue, and a fight broke out, and the two refs killed the coach. And on top of that, the two refs were policemen, so that it was just a colossal mess, to say the least. So it is important to have everybody on board. But we paid out a lot of money on that claim, not only the coach, but in the family, but we also paid out for the refs. And I actually wasn't involved with that, and I kind of criticized it. But the point, that's what can happen. So you want to be careful to make sure that everybody is online and is AAU if possible. Sometimes it's just not possible. And that now getting back to the
Hey,
sports accident.
Jim, I have a question on that.
Yeah,
So
go ahead. Yep.
if that ref though was an AAU member, but I mean, would you guys probably wouldn't, or would you cover them if they were at fault? I mean, the ref shouldn't be killing the coach, regardless.
If you break the law, you're not covered. If it's something else happened and he got sued and he had an AAU membership, he'd be covered. But anybody, if you break any law, and it's a criminal act, those are excluded by every company, right, Jim?
Yeah, but you're innocent until proven guilty, and you have to defend it until you can prove that it was a criminal act. I guess you'd only have to go back to the O.J. Simpson case. Was he innocent or guilty? He was found innocent on a criminal effect, but he was found guilty for a civil point of view. And if found guilty on a civil point of view, you get to pay an insurance limit. If you're found just guilty on a criminal basis, then the insurance doesn't have to pay. So I guess somebody says it's about money, or it's always about money. And it really is. They're more concerned about doing it on a civil basis than they are a criminal one.
So if we can take that example and apply it to COVID for the directors in this case, if we have two different agencies that are saying completely different things about moving forward. And we know, according to what we've heard from Jeremy Thiesfeld, who's a state legislative representative, that the DHS, our Wisconsin Department of Health Services, that are putting out guidelines or actually recommendations saying, hey, we should not be having any youth sports activities, no team practices in the state of Wisconsin until we hit benchmarks. So they're saying that, but they're also saying you should follow your local health department guidelines. And our local health department guidelines say, well, we can't keep you from doing anything. As long as you're following some kind of safety plan, you're okay, go ahead. If they're saying two completely different things, and somebody comes through our practice or our building, gets sick and decides to sue us, would you guys cover us if any agency, if our actions are going against any agency in the state?
Well,
Because
it's
we're not,
always, you know,
it's not a
it's
criminal.
a very good, it's a very good question to say the least. And that the answer is simply that as long as you're following the local, state, federal CDC guidelines, then there's not going to be a problem. And when you get two different organizations or counties or states, and we've got in New England where I am, I'm only 10 minutes away from Maine and 10 minutes away from Massachusetts and New Hampshire, so that we got three different states. It's like a tri thing there. So one, Massachusetts is closed down, and New Hampshire's wide open. So I mean, it just goes to show you that this is ridiculous. You can only do the main thing. We all know you have to open up. I mean, I don't, there's anybody out there that simply says we got to stay in-house, shut down everything, and what have you. So we're moving forward, and it's always a safe thing to say that I'm not going to go out of the house because I can't get hurt, versus you got to go out of the house, you know, so that there aren't going to be too many more stimulus packages as far as this goes. If you're hungry, you'd go outside. So I'm pretty much for the thing, you know, move forward, and that we'll defend you unless it's a obvious violation of common sense and violation of the law. And even then, I think they'll defend you. And in many cases, the courts will step in and say, the policy may say no, but we say yes, so that we have to pay the claim, even if the
And
policy
that happens more than you want to think.
Yes, it does. In answer to your question, in New Jersey, those of you who have organizations and facilities that have been shut down have lost a lot of revenue. And you were not shut down. You were shut down because of a government act of civil authority. And you're simply saying the business interruption policy states that we cover for being shut down for civil authority, but only for a specified peril, and which is like fire, windstorm, and stuff. And it says under the exclusions for pandemic, flu, bacteria, pollution, and so forth. And it's been standard exclusion for years and years and years. But New Jersey legislators are trying to pass a law simply demanding the insurance companies actually pay this. Well, the point of the matter is that this is a multi-trillion-dollar problem. The insurance industry has $1 trillion worth of reserves set aside to pay claims. So if they were mandated to pay $3 or $4 trillion, they couldn't do it. So then the federal government would have to step in and bail out the insurance companies. So that it's totally unresponsive, totally ridiculous to have something like that to even sponsor type of legislation. But that's what's going on. You got some states that's actually saying, no, there's no problem. You got the White House simply saying you can't sue the insurance companies for this type of thing. And it's so I still revert back to the general statement. You follow common sense, you follow the local, state, and federal guidelines. If the local people come in and say, no, you can't open up, I would say you can't open up. But if the local says it's all right, and the state says it's all right, and the federal, then what's the issue? So that unless you're in complete violation of the rule of law or stuff like this, I think you're fine.
I would interject too, Lisa, this is kind of important for all of our people, but the AU's position is that if there's a tournament over in Green Bay and that area is open to go play, and you're over in Lancaster, and your group is in a county that, Grant County, that won't let you, they tell you not to go play. The AU's position is that if your club is playing, you're a member, and your club's playing in an event that is licensed and it's been approved, and the event's proved, there you have coverage. Because some have been asking that question, if they leave and go to another state and play in.
Hello?
Hey,
Does that make sense?
Keith, that very end got cut off.
I said I would think that would make sense, that you have coverage. If your club goes and plays an event that's been licensed, approved, and the local area is open, and you came from Minnesota who tells you you're closed down and can't play, the AU's position is if you have a valid membership and your club's going to a AAU event, you have coverage.
Okay, you're saying something specific in there. I have a question about. Okay, just to follow up, you're saying if we're an AU club, we're in a closed county, we go to an open county to an event, you would cover us, but you specifically say to a covered event. If we go to an event that is not an AAU sanctioned event, which this was going to.
As long as you have the added benefit, you're covered.
That's what AB means. Okay, as long as we have added benefits. Great. Okay. Okay.
And that's another reason why I learned that years and years ago when I started the basketball, and when Jim put that added benefit membership in for AAU. And I can tell you, I run the football program nationally. Every single tackle football player is AB, and 60% of my hockey nationwide is AB. And it's a no-brainer, for that extra $2. When you think about the benefits and what you can run across, especially in today's time, it's even got crazier. I wouldn't operate without it. I'm telling you right now, I would not do it.
So I have another question regarding that AB coverage. So I didn't realize this until my 3rd year of running an event. We are an AB club, or we have the AB insurance level. We ran an event, and from what I know, there isn't a lot of sanctioned AU events in Wisconsin. So, and not knowing who runs all of our clubs and who's a member or not, I was concerned about whether or not people would register for that event. So I didn't sanction our event as an AAU event. Later on, I'm in reading the insurance coverage a little bit more carefully. It does say, and correct me if I'm wrong, it does say that even if you are an AB extended club, can I call us that? Is that okay, guys? An AB extended club, even if we have that insurance and we host our own event and we don't certify it, that
technically that's not covered. That's not covered. You have to be going to somebody else's. Now, I'll tell you a way, and Jim's on the phone, so he'll probably want to choke me when I tell you this, but I know of a couple. I know of a couple because they have, businesses besides their travel teams and what have you, and they've had an actual business license and run an event, and their travel teams under a whole different entity and a different 990 and all that stuff went and played in that event. Technically, they are covered because you are going to an event that's not being run by you, the club. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you actually created 2 different entities is what you've done.
Right.
So that but the idea of the AB has always been, if you're an AAU member, you're going to a YMCA tournament, you're fine. And if the next weekend the YMCA comes to your place, then that's not covered. That's the issue as far as this goes. You can't host an AB event. You can host other AAU teams, but you can't host an AB. Now, if you're going to do that, we can provide the insurance outside, for a rider or something like this, so that we can do almost anything. I think I've told Keith a number of times, I can insure a burning building if you want to give me enough premium for it. but it's just a matter of simply knowing your exposures. And if you're hosting an event, it's got to be AAU. If it's not, give me a call.
Okay, so we do have an option if it's not AAU sanctioned. Okay, I guess there's two scenarios. If I run an event that's not AAU sanctioned, is there a way we can have coverage? And if it is an AAU sanctioned event, is it possible to still have coverage if not everybody signs up as an AAU member? Because I guess the concern there was trying to get everybody who registers for the event to get their athletes to sign up for a membership if they're not already.
Yeah, I mean, we write every day. I write events that are not AAU. Excuse me. And the other answer is that I had like 100 teams coming in on an AAU hosted event, and one or two of the teams were not AAU registered.
Mm-hmm.
So it was basketball, and it's like 10 players, 8 players on a team. So it was under 20, and at $14 a card times 20 is not a lot of money. It's $200 or $300. So you would just register everybody AAU, and you brought them into the insurance versus trying to write a separate policy for 1,000 kids.
But if you have more, Jim, like, we know some in the areas, that you write their insurance form where they're covered. I mean, there's literally, yes, Lisa, to answer your question is, yes, Jim can figure out whatever your issue is. He can come up with the answer on what to do.
So Jim, in that case, if I'm running an AAU sanctioned event and you have, like you said, 2 teams of athletes, you would, as the tournament director, you would encourage us to tell them, no, you have to register your athletes, or you're saying we should register them and take
Well,
them?
it depends. If you've got a 100-team tournament, you need all 100 teams, and 98, and you're going to pick up 2 other teams that are not AAU, then you've got 2 choices. You can pay for it yourself, or you can tell the teams, well, you're not AAU, we're going to have to charge you $100 more or something like this, whatever the 14 times whatever number of players, so that I've done it both ways. It's I wouldn't be concerned about it if for a couple $100. It's a lot cheaper to register a team or 2 for a couple $100 at AAU than it is to insure 1,000 kids coming in to play a basketball tournament that might cost you a couple $1,000.
Yeah, I see that. That's a good way
So
to go.
And Lisa, we have some of our biggest basketball tournaments in the Midwest are doing that. One is Bill Larson from North Tartan. He buys that extra coverage, right, to cover any non-AAU teams, right, Jim?
Sure, yeah.
That's a good point. We could just have a different price fee for those who don't have a membership, and then we can, because it's going to cost time for us to get them signed up, get their info and sign up, and pay for their memberships. But that's an option. Okay, I didn't think of it that way.
They have to file a roster. When I'm playing, and if a team comes in that's not AAU, I still have their roster. So I just simply look at them and say, you got. It's going to cost me $140 to register your club AAU, so that and you don't rep as a club, just make them members of your own team, which I do, and it's so your registration is not $200. It's going to be $340 if you want to pass the cost on. But sometimes it's easy just to pay it yourself than to go through the hassle of But no one's going to complain about being a member of the AAU when they got more insurance for nothing.
Right. Okay.
And better insurance, sexual abuse, molestation, what have you, and stuff like that. So it's there's more than one way to skin a cat, I guess is what I'm saying. So don't be afraid to call and say, this is what I got, what's my best way of doing it.
Okay. Keith, you had a question that I just want to make sure we cover. Because of all of our directors, they don't just run their practices. That's cut and dry. It's easy to make sure those athletes sign up for, or make sure that they sign up for their AAU memberships, or the director does it themselves. But a number of them run trainings, clinics, and they may have one person show up and never see them again. These are open times, people can come through, they don't know who's going to, and if they have to pay their fee for training, and then also this AAU thing they have no clue about, you don't know who's coming through the doors, you can't explain it in time, they may just like walk away. Is there a way that we can get coverage for that?
Jim, that's kind of a twofold one too. It brings up that question again we've been discussing. Have we come up with a plan yet for practice insurance or when tryout insurance?
Tryout
That's
and
what I've been recommending that the AAU add a tryout insurance rider. So when you're registering your team or club, and it's, say you got 100 kids or something like this, and it's I have the same thing. I mean, I got 350 kids, and I can tell you 25 or 30 of them that show up can't even walk and chew gum at the same time. How are they going to hit a baseball? So that I try to provide something along that line. I just pay it out of my own pocket. I mean, but the point being is that I think a good idea to have some type of tryout insurance, and I understand, $14 or $16 or whatever it is, it costs me a lot of money to run my club, I can tell you that, so that just irks you to spend anything more, is to have a tryout. For example, I said, my tryouts are usually April 1st to about April 10th. And so I would buy an endorsement for that period of time to cover my tryouts, and maybe it's $50 or $100 or something.
You think we can get that policy, Jim, in where it's specific to like tryout is we name the dates, on each individual club could notify that it's a separate license to do that, but it's going to say tryouts and it's on April 9th and 10th or whatever it is. Might be a couple different weekends at tryouts, but instead of trying to think they're going to make everybody an AAU member for tryouts, as you well know, that's not going to happen with 90% of them. They don't have any problem making everybody that makes their squad or their club, then they're going to make them a member. But there's not many of us that, have them go on and do their AAU membership card. And then I can tell you that even when you tell them to do it, give them the link to go there, there's always about 25% to a third of them that by the time they show up for tryouts, they haven't done it yet. And
I know.
we have that every year.
That's the reason
Lisa's got a good point there, and I think a lot of other people, because we have a lot of people now doing training because they can't play games. So this is going to be a big issue too, where, okay, but we're going to have, and I don't know how it's going to work for tryouts or whatever, but I think I don't know if Lisa were explaining it well enough, but I really do believe we do need that tryout insurance.
Jim,
Yep.
I hear what you're saying, that it sounds like we could do what you call a rider for certain days. In the basketball world, which I wish was more like the club volleyball, and for you guys, it sounds like you do, you have your set week. With basketball, it tends to just go on and on and on. We might have tryouts in October, again in November, and then in January. So there's multiple dates, and sometimes you're figuring out, well, what is the exact date we're gonna have those? And they may adjust and change over time. And then in addition, because we have our own facility, we're able to have people come in even in between those times, because they can't make those tryouts on the weekends we select because they're in another sport or they got choir or whatever it might be. So we have them come in on a different date, and we might do an individual or a small group assessment outside of those tryouts. So it's almost like I could say tryouts go on half the year or for the entire year. Is there a way to write that rider just to add in with our insurance policy for the whole year?
Yeah, that's I know what you're saying, because on basketball and baseball in my area, it's very specific, and we just have the first two Saturdays in April, and that's it. So it makes it simple. And football, probably the same thing. But basketball, I agree, is kind of like an open it's like an open gym, if you will. You know, you just come in and try out and what have you and stuff. And I'm sure if you're 7 foot tall and can dunk the ball, I'll
Yeah.
come in on a Sunday. Make a difference to me. So that and that in that circumstances, I think we would have to individualize your policy yourself. We really haven't thought through the process of having a completely open gym type of thing, because what would happen is you could have 500 people a member of your gym and only register half of them and let the other half be covered under the so-called tryout. And we haven't expanded the tryout thinking that deeply into having an open tryout type of period, because it'd be too difficult to determine how many kids are trying out and what's the proper premium to charge. But in the case that you're talking about, where you may have a tryout, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 tryouts a month or something like this, we give it our best estimate of what it is and then make you a charge for the entire year. But right now, I would think that would probably be outside the AAU. We'd have to write a separate policy.
Okay. And so I guess it falls in the same question of trainings as well, because coaches, directors will run trainings throughout the year, weekly or twice a month, whatever it might be. So that,
As long as they have that, if they have that membership, Lisa, they're covered. And then I would think anybody that's going to be doing it with kids multiple times, then it's a no-brainer to have the AAU membership, to have the coverage.
yeah, I think
Well,
my concern is that in the language, the insurance language, it had said, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was my understanding that if anybody is participating, like let's say 9 of the 10 athletes have a membership, but that one doesn't, it wipes out our policy. Is that true?
no, it's
No.
I've been saying this for years as far as this goes. Let's say you have a club with 100 players, and 99 are registered and one are not. One is not, and that one happens to get injured. That's a clerical error. That's not fraud. However, if you had 100 members of your club and only one was registered and 99 are not, and you've been doing that for 4 or 5 years in a row, I kind of think even your mother's going to say, I think that's wrong as far as this goes. And we had that in one of the New England states. I called the guy, it was 225. He had like 3 people registered. And well, he says, I just forgot. He said, yeah, you forgot, all right.
Lisa, I have this every week, being that I literally oversee over 60,000 athletes in 2 sports and the state of Wisconsin. And every week I have 2 or 3 where an individual got hurt and they paid for their membership or somebody didn't do it. And it comes down to this. Then they usually will contact me as the chair and say, this kid got hurt over in this league or club, is this legit or whatever? And I make a call to who's run the club. And I can tell you right now that 9 out of 10 times is what Jim said. It's a clerical error. Somebody didn't just screwed up and didn't get them registered when they're sitting there doing a couple hundred kids. It's easy to miss 1 or 2, as you can imagine. And some of them aren't that good about going through and checking it with a fine-tooth comb like they should. It is what it is, but no, it will not invalidate your club insurance. I can assure you of that.
Good to know. Thank you.
And I'll use a check if a parent paid $14 or $16 on July 12th and it fell through the cracks and didn't get registered, he got hurt in October, we'd still pay because the date of the payment is the date of coverage.
Yes, that's the other thing.
Say that one more time, Jim.
If, for example, somebody paid you $14 or $16 and it just didn't get, the registration fell through the cracks, then that proof of that check would be the evidence of the so-called registration.
The date of registration would be the date of payment, Lisa. So in other words, if they registered with you, the club, on the 21st, and they got hurt on October 12th, and they say they paid you and they show proof of that payment, they're going to be covered, and it's going to be effective. The date of the check would be their membership.
So if they got injured, yeah, before they paid the registration.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah,
We had one case.
Right.
We had one case where a kid, his mom was the diving coach, and the young kid was fooling around the diving board, and unfortunately it cost him his life. And then they made him a member the day after it happened. And that is not a good thing.
Right.
That was fraud. You know, so that we bend over backwards to try to find the thing and such, but clearly I go back to my other example, is it was 100 kids and 99 are not registered. You're going to be a hard time trying to convince me, you know, that this is legit. But if one or two are not registered, that can happen. We all understand that as far as this goes. So that, and I had one coach that was a lawyer, smart guy and stuff like this, and that he had like 30 or 40 players, and that he just registered himself. He didn't understand the so-called process of one of his first 1 year or 2 years doing this. And he said, I didn't realize I had to register kids. I thought by registering my club, they were automatically registered. And he had plenty of money, so it wasn't that. And so we took care of the thing as such because his explanation made a lot of sense.
I know we're getting to that hour time frame. There was a question that Cheryl had asked, and I think this is more, it might be personal for everybody. She said if she does have AAU insurance, can she just get rid of her other insurance policy? I mean, I don't think you guys can just blanket answer that, right?
You really need to you have to analyze the entire exposure. If she's got a facility that she owns or what have you, then she still would need facility type insurance. You get a credit because of having AAU. When I write a facility, I give credits by having that AAU coverage. But if you need 24/7,
Yeah,
then you.
I would strongly suggest on that, anybody that has a business and they're doing AU travel teams or whatever, they need to talk to Jim to see what's covered by AU and what's not. And then he's pretty good about being able to get credit for the part that the AU is already covering, and then what your needs are. And like with Cheryl, she doesn't own a facility and she's a club, and yeah, I don't see Jim like with her. And you can look at whatever, I don't know what kind of extra policies carrying, never even knew she was, but I'd like you to look at that and see why she's even doing that, because everything all of her kids are AAU and she rents the facilities and that. So I'm not sure what that's about, but at least I'm glad you brought it up. She's not on the phone call, is she?
No. So I guess it probably matters what the individual situation is.
Yeah, we'll follow up with her because I want to see what she's doing, and then we'll let you know. And if it's something we feel is important for everybody to know, we'll tell everybody.
Thank you.
It might be a try, something like that.
It does raise a question, Keith, about Jim. I'm sure Jim doesn't work 24/7. So
He kind of does. He kind of does. He's like me.
Yeah. So, is Jim someone that, I guess, what is Jim's role besides all so you're an underwriter, is that right, Jim?
No.
No, I'm the broker agent for nationwide programs throughout I'm a managing general agent. I have my own programs I write stuff through, so that. But I'm the agent broker versus insurance company. But on a couple of sports programs, I actually manage the program, so I might call it managing general agent. In essence, act like the company. I underwrite it, rate it, do the claims and stuff like that, so that I work both sides of that.
Okay.
And
So if we have specific questions regarding our own situation, because there's so many AAU members across the country, I'm sure Jim couldn't answer them all individually. Is there a process that we should use? Yeah,
you send them in, like in Wisconsin, you guys will send, I'm on the insurance committee. I'm co-chair for National AAU for insurance. So it's a good thing you can send your questions in to me, and 9 out of 10 times I probably know the answer. But most times, if it's dealing with where an insurance agent should answer that question, then I always get Jim involved, and I do have his direct numbers everywhere. Yeah. and his wife can find them too, so.
Is the best process as well, like if we wanted some help on comparing, so we run a facility, or somebody who's an AAU club might rent a facility, they have questions on if they have a separate liability policy
Go
under,
right to Jim, go directly to Jim, and then he'll have you send his, your policy over to him, and then he'll compare it with what you're doing in the AAU, and there's a good chance that maybe he can save you some money on top of it since you're doing AAU besides.
so you want us to send the email and information to you, Keith, or to Jim?
No, I think on that, where you have outside business going on, there's no reason for me to see that or become involved in that. It's just that, I would forward everything you would send to me anyway over to Jim, and then have him contact you to deal with you. So we can give you Jim's email right now. It's probably on the email I sent to everybody, but just in case, it's Jim, if everybody gets ready here. And then Lisa, you can send that out to everybody too, that if they have any questions for those that weren't on. But send it to jim.foy, F-O-Y, insurance
At,
at,
no, it's just jim.foy at foyinsurance.com.
yeah, at foyinsurance.com.
Yep, jim.foy@foyinsurance.com, and I'll include that
Yes.
in email and notes.
And then you want his office number? I can give you his office number too.
Sure.
Jim, you give them the number there you want them to have.
Yep, 603-772-4781, and my extension is 113.
And just identify yourself when the secretary answers or whatever that you're an AAU club in Wisconsin.
Okay, Jim, you're good with that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I should just see if anybody is still on and you have any specific questions for yourself or your own club. Does anybody have any questions right now?
And the ones that couldn't make it, I know who they are, and I'll be getting on with them this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Hi, Wayne, I see you.
Wayne, you're muted.
Yeah. Oh. I can unmute you, Wayne. Give me 1 second here. Let me just make sure. There we go. Okay, Wayne, you're unmuted. If you want to ask a question. Putting you on the spot. Looked like you wanted to say something. Now
I think he's driving. I think I hear sirens behind him.
Maybe. Oh, are you talking, Wayne? It's weird. We can't hear you. Oh, he is talking, but there's no sound coming through.
I think he has to go to that bottom thing. I have to do that too and hit that audio button
Yes,
down
yes.
there. Was that him? No.
Nope. Still can't hear you. Man. Oh, he must have a bad connection.
Maybe Wayne, if you could, just send me an email when you get a chance with your number and I'll call you later.
Hey, Eddie from Wisconsin Dynasty, do you have any questions at all? I'm going to unmute you right now. Listening to good music. Nope, he muted. Looks like he may not have any questions. So, yeah. Okay.
Well, we'll just follow up with everybody.
There is one more question that I had sent off, Keith, that we didn't cover.
Okay.
And it was about filing claims. So, okay, we know that you guys would protect us. So if we had to get on the defensive, if somebody wanted to prosecute us, what if we find negligence or fault from our state and what they've done and shutting down our businesses as a non-essential and the losses? is there coverage if we want to, is the right term, sue somebody, or what's a nicer word for it? But take somebody to court?
No,
Yeah, I
Jim,
think
you can
it's-
explain that.
Yeah, it's the business interruption one that if you've got a policy that covers loss of earnings or business interruption, and your business was shut down because of an act of civil authority by a local, state, or federal type of thing, and it's the claims, thousands of claims have been denied because it's virus is not a covered peril. Your policy excludes that type of situation. The Spanish flu killed 20 million people 100 years ago, and it wasn't covered. You had a flu last year, and same thing. It's just the problem is the coronavirus is unprecedented. What it's done is shut down the country, shut down the world, and it's caused some huge losses. And at least the federal government has woke up and said we cannot afford to stay down. The coronavirus is serious, but it's not as serious as having a shutdown of the economy where you'd end up in a depression and destroy things for years and such. So that
Hey,
I know.
Jim, I can interject on this because Cheryl had talked to Jeremy, the legislator, and he said to her, he said, you should tell Keith to have the AAU national office apply for the phase 4 money that the government has in that program, because there's money there for business interruption for organizations like ours. And I got Angela on the phone, our CPA, and she did not know that that existed, but this was just about an hour and a half ago, but she's going to check into it. And Lisa, you know, it's coming over. Cheryl's going to get it from Jeremy, and he's going to send it to her. And then when it comes over to me, because there's so many mounds and mounds of documents, you know, you got to go through. But at least if we can get to the right place and we got somebody that deals with that on a day-to-day basis, if there's a way of getting money for not only our districts, our clubs, and our event operators, then we're going to get that information out to all of you, and we're on that.
Okay. That sounds good.
Good.
Okay.
We good?
Yep. Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much for your
Yep.
time and your wisdom.
Yep.
Yep.
Have a good weekend,
Thanks.
everybody. Jim, thanks a lot for taking the time to do this.
No problem. I'll see you. Bye-bye.
All right, you got it. All right. Later, Lisa.
Bye, Keith.
All right.
Bye, Kara.